This is from Epic847. And he said, where would you rank Jimbo Fisher against other coaches in the SEC? I feel like when he first came in, he was considered the best behind Saban and Smart, but now I feel he's been passed by Mullen and Orgeron. How does he get back to that top level? Well, I'm really high still on Jimbo Fisher. I've taken some flack for this over the past few weeks, talking to some of my buddies in group text, but it's about trying to see around the corner. Anyone can see right now what the relative struggles of Texas A&M's program have been first 2 years under Jimbo Fisher, but I'm trying to see around a corner because one of the hallmarks of successful, wise people who have done something for a long time, they don't just keep sticking with things that don't work. So if you're seeing something that doesn't work and you're right about it, Jimbo Fisher has long since seen the same thing, and I don't think he's sticking with stuff that doesn't work. It's not above this guy, what I'm trying to tell you, it's not above this guy to tweak something about his program or to change something about the way they go about doing things. In fact, I have reason to believe that that is happening and will happen. How much is needed is the question. The offense has to significantly improve. Everyone can see those results and what you're not getting in those results. I mentioned Bud earlier. Bud, again, did another feature, I think it was like a few weeks ago. We read it on the show, and it was about a pretty alarming stat trend with A&M. As meager as their offensive output was last year, when you looked at winning time versus desperation time, in other words, snaps where the game was truly in the balance versus snaps towards the end where team had a 2-possession plus lead on you and they're playing some form of preventative defense, not necessarily full-blown prevent. That's when A&M racked up a majority of their offensive output. So, that's doubly troubling. However, now we look at the cry against Fisher, and the cry always starts with this. Our play calling's got to get better. Oh, he's not a good play caller. Are you? Yes, he is. Jimbo Fisher's a great play caller. Jimbo Fisher knows exactly what he's doing. What you need to question is, have they developed well enough? Player development and play calling, two totally different things. Have they developed well enough? I've never thought that highly of Kellen Mond. I think he's a good athlete. As a quarterback, and I'm talking about a quarterback that you're trying to saddle and ride to an SEC Western Division championship, I've never thought he has that ceiling. I think he's a really good player. Now, if I were Kellen Mond and I were sitting right here, I probably wouldn't be sitting here wasting my time, but if I were here and Kellen Mond was right behind this camera, the first thing he would say to me, if he were being honest, was, "Did you see the offensive line I was having to play behind last year?" And that's part two. When we're looking at Jimbo Fisher, we got to take everything into consideration. Hey, maybe there's no problem with him calling plays. Maybe he's got a quarterback that's adequate enough. Maybe they haven't had the personnel on the offensive line. Maybe they've had inconsistency at receiver. All this ultimately falls on the head coach. I get that. What I'm saying is I think it's safe to say he's got the best roster he's had this year so far. And so year 3, I don't know that there's nearly as much that has to change about him as a lot of other people. But having said that, now, there could be a million reasons. You may call them excuses. I may call them reasons for their results. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to have coached the game for 40 years. You don't have to understand the intricacies to understand whether the results are good enough or not. I've never given birth, for example. I've never delivered a child before. I've never been a doctor. But I know an ugly baby if I see it. And you know an ugly baby if you see it. You don't have to understand everything about it to know. And you don't have to understand everything about offensive football to know Texas A&M competes against this team and this team and this team, and they're doing this, and A&M's doing that, and that is not good enough to overtake this. That's where we are right now. But you asked, where does Jimbo Fisher stack up? If I believed that he was a better head coach than Ed Orgeron 2 years ago, nothing in my mind has changed. If I believed that 2 years ago. And the reason that I think that way is because my opinion on coaches, the acumen, the caliber of a coach, I always, since I have this book in front of me, if you're listening on the podcast, I'm holding something flat in my hand. If you were to take a drop of water and put it on this book right now, and I turn this book sideways, where would the water go? The water droplet would fall off very quickly. This is like Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park in that back seat. But if I were to take a drop of honey and I put it in that same spot and I turn the book sideways, the honey would start to move south, but it would move a lot slower. That's how I formulate my opinion on coaches. I have an opinion that moves with the speed of honey instead of the speed of water on coaches. It just leads to such nonsensical knee-jerk type reactions sometimes. So with Jimbo Fisher, I still think he's in the top tier of head coaches in the SEC. And part of that, and this is a hunch that I have, is because I think that he is willing and planning on adapting what hasn't worked for him so far to what he is capable of doing with the athletes he has and his acumen to what will work moving forward.